Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hope you're doing well. Now, I want to continue upon discussing the film All Quiet on the Western Front, which deals with the German and the French in the early 1900s and trench warfare. Now, there's a scene where all the young, fresh recruits are going to gather and listen to a war speech, an enlistment speech. And in this scene, it's very powerful because the young men become highly motivated. They're very enthusiastic, they're full of joy, potentiality, and their eagerness to get up on the front lines is quite intense. And the individual speaking to them, don't know what position he held in terms of military rank, but he tells them the Kaiser needs soldiers, not children. And he tells them any hesitation is a betrayal of the fatherland. And so, if you see later on how those children who are naive, they're not sure-footed, later become kind of driven killers, or they endure their panic and their suffering, you see how they did change. And it's true, in times of war, you don't need children, you need soldiers, because soldiers do what duty calls them to do. And as I said in another video, you begin to see how the German youth became so enthusiastic about enlisting, but also you can ponder upon how past speeches like that were done for different countries throughout time, through different civilizations. Because to get the young men to go on the warpath, they really have to be talked to. And there seems to be a certain style, skill for that type of war rhetoric that can keep people motivated and enthusiastic to head on into events that will change the course of their life forever. They are leaving behind all comfort to then go into trench warfare. Now, it's true that in that scene, those young men don't know what they're getting into, and later on in the film, one of the young men says, "This isn't quite what I imagined," as they are using their helmets to scoop out muddy water and toss it out of the trenches because it's filling up due to the rain. And so the bleakness of that type of warfare comes later for them. But the ones who are trying to make their blood a little bit more hot for war, or at least strengthen their spine and knees, are giving speeches to them so that they can endure during times where there's a lot of doubt. Now, you can look at that scene from the perspective of a very far leftist who says, "Oh, cannon fodder, brainwashing, propaganda." But I'd argue that you have to look at it from another angle of survival, because women need men who are able to convince men to go and fight so that we can stay home and be safe and carry on. It takes both people to convince those to enlist and to stay enlisted, and those who are willing to be guided by that type of speech. Others would say manipulated, but either way, you need the giver and the receiver in a situation like that. And that scene was pure innocence in a way, because the young men are all jumping around. They're excited, they have rose-colored glasses, as we say, for what they're going into, and that changes quickly once they encounter their first grenades, their first sign of death, and where fear grips their bones down to the joints and the marrow. And the contrast set up in the film between that super hyper joyous moment and the darkness that comes later on, it's a very well done cinematographic moment where the humanness comes out in those soldiers. And I like that it's the German soldiers, because the people of Germany, they didn't just wake up overnight and become these supervillains. Because every empire is built upon blood, especially America. I'm sure civilizations in the future will make movies about what America did throughout the Middle East, did to the tribes. America doesn't have a pure history. And today, with our warmongering and our military-based empire, people will sing songs that are not as glorious as we would love to think. And either way, whether you see it as an occupying force or a liberation force, you still begin to notice the pureness in the young male psychology and how that'll affect them later on. There's a pureness to it, where those young men are full of light, innocence, enthusiasm, and they want to protect, which is the natural male condition. And to just see all of them happy and throwing up their certificates in the air, and it comes piling down, and you know that not everyone will make it home, and that individual giving the war speech knows so many coffins will be returned, but he must still make them solid so that they can go forward and do what they must do. Even if you're the offensive side or the defensive side, you still have to motivate your soldiers. And fear, love, glory, war booty, you name it, there are motivating factors, yes. And a good commander has to know how to motivate his soldiers, and how they motivate an experienced veteran to keep going, how they motivate a new recruit is going to be different. There's going to be a style and flow that'll be useful for each stage of a veteran's, or rather a soldier's level. So the new recruit, he gets a beautified speech that helps ignite his masculinity so that he must endure what is to come. And I found that to be a very refreshing scene, which I haven't really gotten to see before. You usually hear great military speeches in so many different movies, but this one was unique because you're seeing the innocent young men be spoken to before they enlist, instead of as the enemy is at the gate. Right? This is before they've gotten into the nitty-gritty. And I thought it was interesting how the line of fatherland instead of motherland. Betraying the fatherland, it almost sounds like you're betraying your father. You don't want to disappoint your father or the Kaiser. So it kind of shows how they had a love for their Kaiser and a love of their nation. Right? And so it just hints more back to, you have to have people who are willing to perish on behalf of the nation. Because history was written by raiders and invaders and conquests. That is just how humans are. And territorial disputes are in the animal kingdom and the insect kingdom. I mean, the way ants will tear each other apart when another colony encounters another colony is just astounding. And even plants that have invasive root systems. It's fascinating when you really look at how different roots will overtake other plants and take them out. And that's why you have to de-weed your garden or be careful of what plants you put next to each other. Life is a competition. And so when you see these young men getting ready to have their lives changed, and their innocence to be undone, you're almost transported into their shoes, and to all men's shoes through time. Because as women who will raise sons who will fight in wars, you begin to see their purity and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made them to want to defend and protect territory and their families, their communities, men being the caretakers of women. In that scene, you can feel the fitra, the natural male disposition, coming out through the actor's brilliance and the overall joy in that atmosphere. Because there's so many different ways you can look at it, as I mentioned. You can look at it as those poor, foolish idiots, or wow, they're about to become men. And it's a necessary transition, a necessary ritual. The ritual must begin, and that is the beginning of it. For them to be no longer boys, to transform themselves into soldiers. And they need to have that energy of another strong male encountering them. And the actor portraying the German strength by using his fists and having that very tense energy that the 19th century Germans had, you can see how the young men respected that. And the frailty of these young men, in terms of being like a horse not really used to his horseshoes type of energy going on with them, that they were, guided through their doubtful period. And a lot of men today are lacking that. When the young men are looking for their motivational person to help them get through their doubts with strength and vigor, we would hope they can find it. When you don't have a lot, it causes problems. And I feel like we can empathize with the young German youth who were persuaded and motivated by such a figure in the military, helping them to overcome their fear of enlisting. Right? And that if you're in the trenches and you want to know what's it all about, sometimes the love of your land, the desire to become a man and no longer be a teen boy type of mindset is necessary, and you need to have those motivational factors around you in your mind when the tensity arises. So it is quite fascinating to say such things to a young group of men, and I found the scene to be very well done. Very well done. Very well done. We don't have young men doing the same as that today, because the numbers who enlisted in World War I were higher than today, and I think the men of today, they enlist a little bit older, right? They just have a different life, but those young men seem to have more of that pie in the sky at the time. And with the internet and video games today, it just seems like there's a little bit of a different energy going on. But still, was a powerful scene nonetheless. And very moving. Let me know what you think about that scene or what I said and whatnot. By the way, if you'd like to join my blog, it's www.subscribestar.com/MilahanArchive. Hope to see you there.